ready to explore some hidden depth.
Hmm.
Today's deep dive, it's all about Spain. But not the Spain you think you know. We're going beyond, the tourist trails, right? To uncover a history full of daring explorers, cultural clashes, and, a legacy that stretches across continents.
And we're diving right into the deep end. Tackling this concept historians call the Black Legend, this idea that Spain's empire is often painted in a very negative light, especially, I think, in the English-speaking world.
Okay. So let's unpack that. I've heard the term before. What exactly does it mean? It sounds pretty intense.
It is. Imagine a history book that only focuses on the villain's story,
Right.
And completely ignores the hero's adventures. The Black Legend, our source argues, it's kind of like that, a skewed version of history that emphasizes Spanish brutality while downplaying, their achievements in exploration, cultural exchange, even education.
So it's like seeing a movie based on a true story.
Yeah.
But they've taken some creative liberties.
Exactly. And our source today is fired up about setting the record straight, especially when it comes to the often overlooked accomplishments of Spanish explorers.
Well, you know me. I love a good adventure story. I have to admit, when I think of explorers, I usually think of, say, Magellan or Columbus. Who are some of these lesser-known Spanish figures we should know about?
Get ready to be amazed. Our source is particularly passionate about Hernando de Soto, the man who actually discovered the Mississippi River.
Wait, seriously. I always thought that was someone else. See, this is exactly what I mean. Tell me everything.
The Soto story is incredible. Imagine this. It's the 1540s, and he's leading an expedition through the southeastern U.S., battling swamps, hostile Native American tribes, and the unknown. He even earned the nickname the Conquistador of Three Americas.
Wow. Conquistador of Three Americas. Talk about a title. He sounds like the real deal.
Absolutely. But here's the thing. You don't hear his name mentioned in the same breath as, say, Lewis and Clark, even though their explorations happened centuries later. And there are others, too, like Cabeza de Vaca, who walked across the entire American Southwest facing incredible odds.
Walking across the entire Southwest, that's insane. That makes Lewis and Clark's journey look like a stroll in the park.
Right. These are feats of incredible endurance, courage, and cultural encounters. But they're not exactly household names. And our source points out that this isn't a coincidence. They argue that other countries, like the U.S., have done a better job of celebrating their explorers.
You mean like Davy Crockett and Buffalo Bill?
Exactly. Our source argues that while these figures are undoubtedly part of American history, their accomplishments are often romanticized and elevated in a way that overshadows the equally impressive and perhaps less glamorized feats of the Spanish explorers.
So it's like we're missing out on a whole chapter of exploration history simply because it hasn't been given the same spotlight. But it's not just about recognition, is it? This conversation, it inevitably leads us to the more difficult aspects of Spain's history, particularly, the conquest itself and its impact on indigenous populations.
You're right, we can't shy away from those conversations, and our source acknowledges the violence and brutality inflicted on indigenous peoples. However, they're pushing back against a simplistic narrative, urging us to remember that brutality wasn't unique to the Spanish.
So they're saying that other European powers committed atrocities as well.
Precisely. And even pre-Columbian civilizations in the Americas had their own forms of conflict and conquest. Our source argues that we can't view these historical events through a modern lens, right, without considering that broader context.
It's like judging a fish by its ability to climb a tree, right? Each era had its own set of rules, beliefs, and even justifications that might seem, horrifying to us now.
Exactly. And while we shouldn't condone the violence of the past, our source argues that understanding the complexities of the time is crucial for forming a more balanced and informed perspective.
So it's not about letting anyone off the hook, but understanding that full picture, even the uncomfortable parts.
Right. And speaking of complexities, our source then shifts gears to a topic that they're surprisingly passionate about: the Spanish language itself.
Oh, interesting. What's their take on that?
They point to the beautiful and expressive way Spanish is spoken in Latin America as a testament to the lasting impact of Spanish culture and heritage. They suggest it's more than just a linguistic legacy. It's a deep-rooted connection to the past.
And yet they seem to suggest that somewhere along the way, Spain itself may have lost some of that connection to its own past.
That's an interesting observation.
Yeah.
And it's a point our source returns to again and again. They seem to be wrestling with this idea. Why isn't Spain celebrating its history with the same passion and pride that you often see in Latin America.
It's kind of head-scratcher, isn't it? You'd think they'd be shouting from the rooftops about these incredible explorers and their impact on the world.
You'd think so. And our source points to a few possible reasons for this.
Okay.
One is the very thing we're talking about,
Hmm.
this pervasive Black legend. If you're constantly being told, both internally and externally, that your history is something to be ashamed of,
Right.
it's easy to see how that could lead to a sense of reluctance, even a fear of celebrating your own identity too loudly.
So it's a vicious cycle. The Black legend feeds this sense of unease with their own history, which then makes it harder to promote a more balanced perspective.
Precisely. And our source argues that this goes beyond just history.
Okay.
They see this same tendency towards self-criticism and a hesitancy to challenge accepted narratives playing out in modern-day Spain, contributing to some of its current challenges.
So they're not just talking about the past, they're drawing a direct line between how Spain views its history and its ability to thrive in the present.
Exactly. They suggest that understanding and reconciling with the complexities of the past, both the triumphs and the tragedies, is crucial for navigating the complexities of the present and building a stronger future.
That reminds me of something you mentioned earlier about how other countries, like the U.S., grapple with their own, difficult histories.
You're right. Our source draws a parallel there.
Yeah.
They point out that many Americans are acutely aware of the injustices inflicted upon Native Americans. And there's a growing movement to acknowledge and atone for those wrongs.
And they're suggesting that Spain hasn't fully embraced that same level of self-reflection.
Exactly. And they seem to be suggesting that this lack of a clear-eyed, honest conversation about the past might actually be holding Spain back in some ways.
It's interesting they brought up the U.S. because it makes me think about how we love a good underdog story, a tale of resilience and overcoming adversity. And when you really dig into these Spanish explorers' stories, they're full of those same elements, daring feats, incredible odds, encounters with different cultures.
Right. Francisco de Orellana, the one-eyed man of the Amazon, our source was so captivated by. Talk about an adventure story.
Navigating the Amazon River, facing unknown dangers, discovering new lands. It's like something out of an Indiana Jones movie.
And yet, how many people know his name?
Mm.
Our source argues that these stories of courage, resilience, and exploration should be celebrated, not just in Spain, but around the world.
It's like they're saying, hey, we have these incredible stories to tell, but somewhere along the way, we forgot how to tell them or maybe even how to listen to them.
And that's where this conversation takes a really interesting turn. Our source seems to be suggesting that by clinging to this singular, often negative narrative of the Black legend, we might be missing out on a much richer, more nuanced understanding of the past.
It's like looking at a tapestry, but only focusing on one small dark thread while ignoring the intricate patterns and vibrant colors all around it.
What a great analogy. And our source seems to be inviting us to zoom out, to broaden our perspective and consider the possibility that there might be other stories, other perspectives, other ways of understanding this complex history that we haven't even considered.
So it's not about erasing the past, but maybe about adding new chapters, new voices, new layers of understanding.
Precisely. And one of the ways they suggest we do that is by looking at history comparatively. They point out that the Roman Empire, the Greek Empire, they all had their conquests, their periods of brutality. But we don't see the same level of blanket condemnation.
It's true. When we talk about the Romans, we talk about their advancements in law, architecture, engineering. We acknowledge their flaws, but we also recognize their contributions to civilization.
Exactly. And our source seems to be arguing that Spain deserves that same balanced treatment.
It's like we can appreciate a good Roman toga party without condoning, say, the gladiator battles, right? We can acknowledge the good and the bad, the advancements and the atrocities without erasing or glorifying either side.
Yeah. Exactly. It's about holding that tension, that complexity, and recognizing that history is rarely black and white. And our source even goes so far as to say that some of the criticisms leveled at Spain, particularly regarding the treatment of native populations, might be more accurately attributed to other historical actors.
Hold on. Are you saying that other nations were actually more brutal in their treatment of indigenous peoples? That's a bold claim.
It is. And it's one that our source feels very strongly about. They argue that the systematic displacement, violence, and cultural annihilation inflicted on on Native Americans, for example, was far more widespread and devastating than anything Spain engaged in.
And yet it feels like Spain is often the one held up as the example of colonial cruelty.
That's their point, exactly. They suggest this is partly due to a lack of pushback,
Yeah.
a reluctance to challenge the dominant narrative and say, hold on a minute, let's look at the bigger picture here.
It's almost like they're suggesting that by not engaging in these difficult conversations, by not challenging these ingrained narratives, Spain is inadvertently allowing its own story to be told by others.
And potentially perpetuating a cycle of self-criticism that makes it harder to fully embrace and celebrate their own history and identity. They have this powerful line in the source material. The biggest enemy of Spain is a part of Spain itself.
Wow, that's a powerful statement. And a little bit heartbreaking too when you think about it. It's like they're saying that Spain is almost complicit in perpetuating its own negative image.
And they contrast this with the pride and openness they've observed in Latin America,
Right.
where they argue that Spanish language and culture are often celebrated with a vibrancy that's sometimes missing in Spain itself.
So it's almost like they're saying, look, our Latin American brothers and sisters can embrace this shared history, warts and all. So why can't we?
Exactly. And ultimately that's the question they leave us with. They're not asking us to glorify the past or to shy away from the uncomfortable truths.
Right.
They're simply inviting us to engage in a more nuanced, more honest, and more complete conversation about history.
So what does that mean for someone listening to this right now? What's the takeaway? What can we learn from all of this?
I think the most important lesson here is to question everything. Don't take any historical narrative at face value, no matter how entrenched it might seem.
Right.
Dig deeper, seek out multiple perspectives, and be open to having your assumptions challenged.
And maybe, just maybe, in the process of uncovering those hidden truths, we'll rediscover the joy of exploration, both geographically and intellectually. After all, isn't that what learning is all about?
Absolutely. It's about venturing beyond the familiar, embracing the unknown, and being open to the possibility that the stories we think we know might hold surprises, nuances, and complexities we never even imagined.
It sounds like our deep dive today has given us a lot to think about when it comes to Spain, its history, and its place in the world. It's a reminder that history isn't just a collection of dates and names in a textbook. It's a living, breathing tapestry woven from countless perspectives, interpretations, and experiences.
And by being open to those different threads, those unexpected connections, we can gain a richer, more nuanced, and ultimately more accurate understanding of not just the past, but also the present and the future.
So the next time you encounter a simplified narrative, a historical truth that feels incomplete, remember today's conversation. Ask questions, challenge assumptions, and dare to dive deeper. You never know what hidden depths you might uncover.